Okay, hi everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the country that we're meeting on today and of the Great Barrier Reef and its catchments, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Today I'm going to be telling you about a group of work and the body of work that an amazing group of collaborators have been doing to progress towards structured, transparent and repeatable prioritisation of effort in the Crown of Thorns Starfish Control Program. This is a body of work that extends across organisations over almost the past decade, and for the past 4 years it's been a big part of operational innovations led by Gurumpa, working closely with research innovations in the COTS Control Innovation Program. So today I'm very explicitly talking on behalf of my colleagues and collaborators at Gurumpa, across the COTS Control Innovation Program and across all the organisations and individuals that have contributed to this thinking over the past 10 years. Prioritisation is critical for almost every environmental management program globally, because I don't know of any program in the world that has all the resources to do everything it needs to do everywhere it needs to do it. And the biggest single mistake that most environmental management programs make is spreading the resources that they do have too thin, rather than focusing them at a scale and intensity that can achieve a meaningful ecological objective. To address this, the COTS Control Program was designed back in 2018 around two key principles. First, rather than trying to control every reef on the GBR, we would scale the number of reefs we were targeting to our resources so that any reef we did control, we could control properly. And second, within that constraint, we would target the highest priority reefs for control. To target the highest priority reefs, we need a way to rank their priority. If I remember correctly, the first reef scale priority setting in the modern COTS Control Program happened at a meeting between Gurumpa, RRC, AMPDO, CSIRO and UQ in Cairns around 2017. We sat around a table and kind of eyeballed and did some back-of-the-envelope calculations around a number of data sets about where we knew COTS were, how we thought ocean currents were spreading COTS and coral larvae, and tourism visitation numbers. And those of us in the room used that data and our own expertise to come up with a priority list for which reefs would be targeted. It was a huge step forward at the time in that it was strategic and it was based on data and expert knowledge, but the way it was structured wasn't repeatable, and it wasn't transparent for people that didn't happen to be in the room that day. From 2018 to 2020, that system was refined in terms of the way data was incorporated and the way the decisions coming out of it were communicated, but the overall structure remained broadly similar until 2021, when Gurumpa initiated a number of major innovations, and the COTS Control Innovation Program research phase began, and in particular project CCIP-R-07, which is multi-criteria decision analysis for reef prioritisation, started. And that's a project that I co-lead with Professor Mike Bode from QUT. So since 2021, Gurumpa and CCIP researchers have made a number of major innovations to the prioritisation process around streamlining and standardising the data and process used for prioritisation, increasing the inclusivity and the cross-section of stakeholders involved, developing and implementing a multi-criteria decision analysis approach to improve the reproducibility and transparency of how reefs are prioritised, increasing the quantity and quality of data flowing into the process, and improving the way that both similar types of data are combined and the way dissimilar types of data are combined in order to prioritise reefs. We've made a heap of progress, and we still have a lot of progress to make. The point, like much of CCIP and a lot of the COTS Control Program, is a few years ago we identified areas we could make improvements, we could make a difference. We've since made them, but we've also established a foundation for continuing innovation in the way reefs are prioritised for COTS control. So I'm just going to briefly run through these major innovations in prioritisation. Prior to 2021, the prioritisation process aimed to balance three key objectives: COTS risk, larval source and tourism, but it combined them informally and it mixed the process with expert input. In 2021, Gurumpa led three big innovations with the creation of a Power BI dashboard to streamline the preparation and interpretation of data, the formalisation of the prioritisation workflow so that stakeholders could see how it ran and where they could have input into it, and the introduction of a prioritisation workshop where the priority reef list was talked through and refined in response to operational insights from on-water contractors and researchers, and then as the years went on, increasingly also with traditional owners. So this was a massive step forward in terms of the inclusivity and the formal structure to the prioritisation process. But in 2021, we only really recorded a lot of the way that we made these decisions semi-formally and in aggregate. So, and I've indicated that in these diagrams as these green clouds. So looking back, we know which reefs were prioritised, but we don't have a good record of exactly how we made some of those trade-offs and how one reef ended up on the list and another reef didn't. And again, it would be hard for someone that wasn't involved to look from the outside and understand how we'd made those decisions. In 2022, Gurumpa worked with CCIP researchers to significantly refine and improve the amount and quality of data that went into the ecological value estimation and the way those similar types of data sets were combined. So there was both more ecological data, but we also captured exactly how that ecological data was combined to create an overall value, which I've indicated by changing the green cloud to a purple summation symbol. And also changing the traffic light colour codes in the bottom left table to quantitative numbers. The new data layers that were incorporated were important for ensuring that the reefs that were being prioritised were the ones that could achieve the objectives of the management program, and replacing that informal process for combining data with a formal process allows us to explain how the data contributes to the reefs that make it onto the priority list. That increases repeatability and it increases transparency. It also provides a platform to allow even more data to be incorporated in the future. So by having this formal process, we could increase from 2 ecological data layers to 5, but we can equally increase it to 10 or 50 or 100. In 2023, we then moved to significantly refining the way dissimilar types of data were combined, which I've indicated by changing the green cloud at the bottom of the screen to a purple summation symbol. And this is the way, in this case, that the ecological and the economic data are combined. This is a bit more nuanced because ecological and economic values are not generally directly comparable. And more importantly, how stakeholders choose to trade off a little bit extra ecological value for a little bit less economic value is fundamentally a subjective value-based decision. In 2022, these trade-offs were still being made. They were just being made implicitly by the people that came to the prioritisation process and brought their values with them. In 2023, Mike Bode and I ran a swing weighting elicitation asking stakeholders the relative weight they'd give a reef that provided ecological benefits compared to one that gave only economic benefits in order to understand and make transparent those weights. The result was that people weighted 2/3 towards a reef that had ecological value and 1/3 towards a reef that had only economic value, relative to a baseline where a reef that had both ecological and economic value was weighted at 1. So this was a nice, clear, explicit result that was both consistent with the hard-coded prioritisation that had been done from 2018 to 2021, but also we found it was consistent with the implicit weighting that people had given the prioritisation process in 2022. The elicitation also showed that there was variance around these mean weights of 1/3 and 2/3, and that variance was relatively normally distributed, not bimodal, and that despite the variance, there was clear separation between those weightings. So that shows that while people might disagree on whether the best weighting for an ecologically valuable reef is 60% or 66% or 70%, they broadly agree that we should be upweighting reefs that have high ecological value. So in summary, we found a good match for what we'd been doing in the past. We found that there's a consensus preference amongst stakeholders to weight the selection of reefs towards those that provide ecological benefits. And we took a process that had been implicit and therefore couldn't be easily understood or discussed, and we've made it explicit and understandable in the way that it influences which reefs end up prioritised for COTS control. More importantly, though, we've also created a platform for doing this even better in the future. So in the same way that formalising how we captured and combined ecological data let us increase the number of ecological layers to whatever we want it to be, formalising this process at the bottom of how we combine dissimilar data types will allow us to drive two major innovations in the prioritisation process in future. It will let us incorporate fundamentally new types of values. Those could be things like community values or traditional owner values. And it will also allow us in future to go out and ask a broader range of stakeholders how they would like us to weight those values as we create those prioritisation lists. So I'll wrap up where I started. Effective ecological management requires prioritisation. That's true for COTS. It's going to be just as true for RAP, and it'll be true for ecological management in general. On the one hand, that's pretty well known. There's plenty of academic papers on conservation planning and prioritisation, and there's a large number of environmental management programs around the world that already, of necessity, prioritise where they invest their limited resources. What's rare, however, is finding an operational management program with a strong ongoing connection to formal prioritisation research to guide repeated annual decisions and learn from them as it goes. I'm not aware of any other program in the world that does that as well as the COTS Control Program. And that's important because for long-term success, prioritising effectively is about more than just the theoretical one-off selection of the best places we could do our research or we could implement our interventions. It's also about the practical skills required to actually implement prioritisation in an operational program, and those skills are just as specialised as the theory of prioritisation. They don't magically appear, they take investment, they take time. So the most important thing about inclusive operational prioritisation is just to actually get started. This can be hard because you're asking people to come on board right at the beginning when we don't know how to do, we don't have the theoretical foundation, we don't have experience of how you do it in practice. But when you get started, you start to build those skills and that data and the knowledge and really importantly the relationships, and you start to learn as you go. And every year you get better. And I think that's exactly what Gurumpa and CCIP researchers and everyone that's contributed to this work over the last decade has achieved with the COTS Control Program. I think it's a credit to all of those involved, and I hope that the skills and relationships that have been built can be leveraged for guiding other decision making on the GBR in future.